Hi everyone, Tiffany here with a process video that is a little bit different than my usual. Today is my very first post as a contributor on the Scrap Your Scraps blog, and the link to my post is down below. And if you haven't heard of the blog before, it's really fantastic. There's a great group of ladies contributing who all have really different styles, so I think no matter what your style is, you should be able to find someone to inspire you. And the whole idea behind the blog is just to share inspiration and ideas with each other about using up the supplies that we already have in our craft space. So today mine is about using acrylic paints. I don't know about you, but I really love the new watercolor trend, and so these guys have gotten a little bit left behind in my space, and so I was just challenging myself to use them on a page, and I thought I would see if I could challenge you to do the same. Unfortunately, when I first videotaped this process video, I had some technical difficulties and I lost the first part of the page. So here is the page in its finished state, and you will see about half of it on film in just a second here, but the very first way to use acrylic paint is to paint this frame that goes around the main cluster to give it a little breathing space from the busy background, as you can see. So this background is Memories by Pebbles Seen and Noted collection, and what I did, I'll just tell you really quickly, is I took my photos, it's a 4x4 and two 3x4s, and I matted them, you can see, on a few different pattern papers, and I started with that so that I could have an idea how much space they were going to take up, and I just made some little pencil marks, and then I painted my rectangle, and that way I could make sure that it was going to be the right size. So I'm going to show you that same idea with a card base, and then we'll pick up with the process video after that. So products, I've got just a plain water bottle I got from Walmart or somewhere, and it's got water in it. I have Artist Loft titanium white acrylic paint, but any white acrylic paint will work. I also have, this is just a black acrylic paint that I got from my local craft store for about $1. And then I'm actually going to be using a mist as well in one of the techniques, but if you have colored acrylic paint, you can use that too for the same idea. I just didn't have any of the right shade, so I used my mists because we're using what we have on hand. I have two brushes here. They're by Daler Rowney. This is a 3/4 inch wash brush, and this is a number 2 round brush, but any small tipped round brush and wide flat brush you have on hand should work for these techniques. And then I have this little palette because, again, it was in my space, but you can do this right on your craft mat, you can do it on wax paper, really anything that you have that won't make a mess that you can mix your acrylic paints on. So I'm using, again, some items from the Studio Calico Lemon Lush collection. If you watch my videos, you know I've been using these from a kit. This is the only piece that actually is from the kit. The rest of these are from the 6x6 pattern pack, 6x6 paper pack. This is a very busy pattern, and I like this technique for bright and busy backgrounds, but you can absolutely use tone-on-tone or plain cardstock if that suits your style better. Just like when I had the layout, I took my photo cluster first. So what I'm going to do here is my sentiment, which says "Love You Forever," and you can do stamps or anything you like to get a sentiment. I'm just using this piece of cut apart from the Studio Calico Lemon Lush collection. The loyalty paper, and I'm just going to line this up on some white cardstock to give it one layer of matting. You can use colored cardstock or pattern paper or nothing. You could really just leave it plain if you want. And I'm going to go ahead and adhere it onto this page, and it's another piece of pattern paper, so there's going to be a little bit of interest. But because that background is so busy, I don't want anything too crazy. I'm adhering it down before I make the cut just because I don't need it to be perfect, but that way I kind of have an idea of what I'm cutting. Alright, so this is going to be the front of my card, and then I just need to decide where I want it to be. I think I'm actually going to turn it this way so it can kind of be on a third. So that's where that is going to sit, and I'm just going to take a pencil and lift this up a little bit and kind of make some little dots here to show me roughly where that's going to sit. And that way I can know basically where I want to paint so that I'm not covering up all of the work I'm about to do. So I'm just going to squirt some acrylic paint on there. If you haven't done this before, with the paint you have, you can take a little and use the middle to see how opaque it's going to be. I want to be able to see the pattern through, but if you want to do 2 layers, 2 coats, you can make it pretty opaque. And if you want it to be even thinner than what you've got on hand, you can add some water to it. I'm not going to be too careful with this. I'm just sort of brushing it on. I want at least some of it to be thick enough to show some brush strokes, but be able to see the pattern paper through it a little bit. And I'm not looking for perfection, so I'm going to maybe be a little bit out of the lines here and that kind of thing. But you could do it as neatly and as, perfectly as you want. My baby is fussing and I need to let this dry, so I'm going to be back in just a minute. If you do use a heat gun, be careful, because if you get the acrylic paint too hot, it will bubble. So I'm going to be right back after I let this air dry. Okay, this is all dry, and with any wet medium you can get a tiny bit of warping when you add it to your page, but we're just going to make sure that when we stick it down to our card base, which I have here, it's just a 4.25 by 4.25 by 5.5 normal card base. When I stick it down onto here, I'm going to use a lot of adhesive, and that will help keep it where it needs to be. You can see that just gives the sentiment a little bit of breathing room. Just kind of separates it from the rest of the background, and it acts as the very first layer in the cluster. And I'm going to use some foam adhesive to stick this on. I happen to use a huge roll by Scotch, and I get these from Amazon. I think I paid about $28 with free shipping for this roll, but if you watch, they go on sale. And I don't want this to get squished in the mail, so I'm making sure I put quite a bit of foam tape on the back. Make sure that's at least sort of straight. And then I probably should have done this adhesive first, actually, but it all works. Just going to use my ATG to get a good amount of adhesive on the back of that. And then I cut this so that it would basically fit with just the teeny tiniest bit of a border on here. So there we go. Really quick and simple card, but it's got a hand painted touch, which I think is really nice. And it's all ready to go.
And now I'm going to show you the second tip, which is updating an older collection by creating your own trendy design. So here are my supplies. I'm going to be using some Artist Loft acrylic paint in titanium white and Illusions spray in turquoise. And this is just a scrap of white cardstock and a 1/2-inch flat brush. So I'm putting some acrylic paint in my palette, and then I'm doing 1 spray of mist. Now you can use more paint or less mist. Well, it's hard to do less than 1 spray, but you can use more paint to get a lighter effect at the beginning here. So I'm just mixing it in, and I'm doing it a bit slowly because I'm trying to make sure that I don't get it too dark. I haven't used very much paint here, so to be able to go a lot darker, I want to make sure I start with a fairly pale shade. And I'm just going to do a couple of brush strokes horizontally across this piece of scratch paper. And again, this is just Nina Solar White cardstock. It's nothing special. So then I'm going to add another spray of color, and I'm going to mix that in. And I'm just going to continue creating these horizontal brush strokes. And I'm not being too terribly careful with this. I do want to blend them together just a bit. And you can make this as subtle or as dramatic as you want by starting with either a lighter color or ending with a much darker color. And here I'm actually going to add just a little bit more ink to the mix because I want it a bit darker. Again, with paint, it's really cool because you can, play around and just work with it until you like the effect that you come up with. I am using spray here because I don't have teal acrylic paint, and it's easier than me trying to mix a color as well as the tone, the lightness or darkness. But you could use colored acrylic paint or stamping, re-inkers, or anything you have that's got a color to it to achieve the same effect. And obviously this is really wet, but I'm just wanting to show you the gradient effect that I got there. And you can see some brush strokes. It's definitely got more texture than just like a printed ombre would have. And the next thing I'm going to show you is the actual process video. So thanks for sticking around. Okay, so here we are back with my original process video, the second half that I was able to salvage. In the background there, you can see the memories paper by Seen and Noted by Pebbles and the acrylic rectangle that I painted. And then I've got 3 photos that are matted on a variety of papers from Pebbles, Seen and Noted, and also Everyday Eclectic by Echo Park. That extra piece there is the gradient that I painted using mist and acrylic paint, and I'm going to fuss around quite a bit trying to find a good place to put this, and in the end I'm going to transform it instead. So these photos are of my son eating his very first piece of cake at his first birthday party, and he was not very excited about it. So that's going to be the story. He was very reluctant. It was sticky, and he didn't know what he was doing. So my husband actually had to give him his very first taste. You caught a glimpse there of the 3 cameras, and those were detail cut out of a piece of Dear Lizzie Daydreamer paper, and you'll see those again in just a minute. Here I've got some black acrylic paint, and I'm going to just thin it out with some plain water and mix it up with my paintbrush, and I'm just going to flick my paintbrush to get some cool splatters. I like this as an alternative to mist because it's quite opaque and it's very matte when it dries as well. And it's also just a little bit of a different texture than the mist, which soaks directly into the paper. It sits on top of the paper a lot more for just a little bit of a different look. I am going to use my heat gun to help dry that and set it a little bit. And I will warn you, you need to be careful when you're heating acrylic paint. If you hold the heat gun too close or focus on one area for too long, it will bubble up on you. It will kind of melt. I'm just kind of showing you the bit of dimension that the acrylic paint leaves even when it's dry. Now I'm going to take some black soot distress ink and edge the cameras that I cut out of that Dear Lizzie paper. And those are going to be kind of the basis of my 3 embellishment clusters. So these are those detail cut cameras from the Dear Lizzie Daydreamer page, and I'm going to use those as part of each of my 3 embellishment clusters. And then I'm just giving a closer look at that dried ombre piece of paper, and I decided to make embellishments out of it instead of using it as a whole piece. So I'm using this Stampin' Up! Star Punch, it actually may be discontinued, to punch out 5 stars. The top one, like you saw, I only could get half a star out of the paper, so I'm just tucking that under the cluster so that you can't see that part of it's missing. And then I'm just kind of arranging them in a way that looks pleasing to my eye. And I've decided that those clusters need something else. So I'm going to start coloring these wood veneer stars with the black paint that I thinned down earlier. And I think that this is a really great way to recolor wood veneers because it's matte and it's very opaque. So if you're looking to be able to see the wood grain through the paint, this is not a great option. If you really want them to be a striking color like black, paint is a great way to do it because it only needs 1 application, and as long as you don't send it shooting across the desk like I just did, it's actually a lot less messy and it only takes 1 application. So that's kind of a bonus tip for you. The next thing I'm going to look for here right now is some die cuts to add just something a little bit different to the page. And I store mine by color. So this is my box of green, teal, and blue, which is my very fullest box. So I'm just looking through for things that kind of fit the motif or the color or the shapes that I'm kind of wanting, which at this point is circular. That tag is not going to make it onto the layout. The vellum speech bubble there is from a Studio Calico kit, and the Always Be You circle is from Ellie's Studio. I believe it's from the Cameron collection. So I don't really want that speech bubble to look like a speech bubble, so I'm going to tuck it in under the top there so it just looks like an oval with the green showing through. And that is going to be basically the shape of my layout. So I'm just going to use my ATG to go ahead and adhere things down. The cameras I'm going to pop up on some foam dimensional tape, and what I use for that is just Scotch foam tape. I have it on a big old roll that I bought at Amazon, and it is not acid free, but these are digital photos, and for me it's just not an issue. I mostly scrapbook for my own memories, so if they don't last 200 years, I'm okay with that, but you may want to make sure that your adhesive is acid free if that's important to you. I'm using the Always Be You die cut here to kind of draw attention to this embellishment cluster to make it kind of a focal point, and that's because it leads the eye from the photos to my title and journaling, which are going to be right beneath it. And that is the next thing I'm going to work on here, the title. I'm going to be using the white Calbarteschi font from the Amy Tangerine Plus One collection, and then also a glittery foam thicker in the Hooray font, and the color of that is aqua. I'm actually going to go ahead and cut this in just a second so that you don't have to watch me place every single one of these letters, but the title is going to be Reluctant First Taste. And I'm using some wax paper to help me with my positioning, and that's great because I changed the title partway through. I decided to put reluctant in at the last minute. And there's my title. I did want to take just one quick second to say I'm sorry if you're hearing baby noises in the background. I'm a new mom and I decided that if this was ever going to get narrated, it was going to have to happen with him in my lap, so I do really appreciate your patience. On the layout, what I'm doing now is trimming down this main page, and I decided that it needed some grounding and to help stabilize it because it was a little bit warped from the acrylic paint. So I'm just trimming the right side and then a tiny bit off the top and a tiny bit off the bottom. And I was able to do that and get some balance without messing up too many of my elements. I do have one little star that's missing the very end of a point, but I don't mind that too much. And then I'm just using my ATG to adhere that all down onto this basil dark gray cardstock. The next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and place those black stars that you saw me create earlier, and I'm just going to put those in little groupings of 2 or 3 in each embellishment cluster. And I like that they're kind of striking. I was thinking about this time that I wish I would have done them in dark gray instead of black, but looking back on the page as a whole, I actually like the way they kind of mix in with the ink splatters. So, and they do guide your eye, I think, around the page. So I like the way that those turned out. And that is the layout. Just a reminder, my 3 tips for acrylic paint are to use the white around your photos to give the base layer, especially on a busy background, to use acrylic paint and a color to make an ombre effect, to give some updated embellishments to an older line, and number 3, to use watered down acrylic paint instead of mists to do your splatters. And then the bonus tip was the painting of wood veneers. So again, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you guys have a great day.